Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Carter DeLoro. I'm from New York City. I went to Pomona College for undergrad, and I worked in admissions at Pomona and Occidental. I've been a school-based counselor across New England and the Midwest, and I'm currently the co-director of college counseling at the Marymount School of New York.
I'm Mark Stucker, and I'm the founder and producer. Our mission is to make college knowledge available to all. We care deeply about your kid. We believe college is a match to be made and not a prize to be won. We believe in being genuine and transparent. We are committed to covering a variety of topics, including the tough subjects. Thanks to your generosity, we're committed to providing a minimum of 10 hours of fresh, commercial-free content every month, with episodes every Monday and Thursday. We have a variety of co-hosts because we believe and value diverse perspectives. You're our listening family, and we get great joy every time we meet with you, as we do our best to give you tools so your students can soar and reach their limitless potential. This week in the news, Carter DeLoro joins me to answer a question from a listener who wants advice for her student who only wants to play video games all the time. And the mom doesn't know how can he stand out in his application if he's totally being honest. It's a great question, and Carter joins me to answer it. And then we'll have part 2 of 3 of my interview with Elliot Felix, author of the book, The Connected College. And we'll be looking at what is a connected college. And then we'll have part 2 of 3 of my college spotlight with 2 students at the University of Pennsylvania who are helping us to know what is it like to be a student at UPenn, the University of Pennsylvania in West Philly.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
All right, friends, Carter is back. I'm very excited to have him on our team, and we've got several exciting questions that you all have sent in today. And I'm going to play the first one, Carter, and get your thoughts.
Okay.
Hi, my question is about how much a student should really show their authentic self when their authentic self loves more than anything in the world sitting home playing video games. And I guess it's twofold. I sense a lot of pressure on the applications to hide that part of themselves, which is understandable. You want someone in your community that's going to add to the community, not sit in their dorm room. But what happens when these kids get to college? They've hidden that fact. They've just highlighted things they are doing that are maybe they're exaggerating a little bit on their application because they didn't spend as much time as they probably should have on those things. But then what happens when they get to college and they just want to sit in their dorm room and play video games? And are there actually kids doing this? Do they find other people to do this with? Do they become part of that community? Or is that just such a no-no and that kid is not going to have a successful time at college? So thanks.
Take it where you want to go.
It's an interesting question, and certainly part of the conversation that, as college counselors we'll have with students as we're getting to know them, as we're getting to fill out the activities list, help them fill out the activities list on the common application. My first thought, I suppose, is to kind of look at a student's passion, in this case, playing video games, and figure out if there are ways that they, through that passion, are exhibiting the kinds of traits that colleges are looking for, right? And so colleges are going to be looking for things like curiosity and commitment. And so are there ways that the student is exhibiting curiosity through the video games that they play? Maybe in a role-playing game can sort of be portrayed as an opportunity for a student to learn about a different perspective in the world. I imagine, as a lot of students would say, it's probably not that deep to them, but I think it can still really be true to see them showcase curiosity, showcase commitment, persistence, resilience in a way that may be transferable to other places. And that's also what I think I would try to do if I was counseling a student in this situation, to say, maybe we can root the essay or an interview, preparing for an interview around this passion, but then to talk about how does that skill or trait that you're developing show up in other areas of your life. And so obviously that's not going to be the case for everybody, but that's the place that I would start with a student like that. And Mark, I guess I'm curious what you think of that.
Yeah, several things. One thing I'm thinking, it would be harder to present this student if they are literally have no other activities at all, right? If it's the person that's all that I do. Normally when we probe as counselors, we can find other things that they do. As Carter well knows this, people have a tendency to have a very simplistic definition of activities. That's why I've said this many times. I kind of don't like that term. I wish they would sort of go with something like time commitments or something, right?
Sure.
Because if you look even at the Common App, when they list all the things that you are to include in there, it includes things like hobbies. It includes special and unique experiences that are meaningful to you. It includes work. It includes a lot of things that people don't think of as being warranted to put in this section. So to me, it's a little harder if it's a student that, well, this is literally what I do all the time, but I normally don't find that to be the case. One of my thoughts was something I frequently do with students is when I see this kind of passion, I start letting them know, there are majors out there, right? Like there's video game design and, like this could be perfect for you. You've got the passion for it. So that would be one of the things that I would talk to them about to see if there was interest there.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I would say if they are not doing, if it's literally the only thing that the student does, then yeah, there's esports teams. I assume if you're playing like 8 hours a day that you're pretty good at something.
Yeah.
And so, exploring if you might be able to be, an esports athlete. I don't know the term, I guess, but
there's scholarships out there for that. There's
exactly
esports scholarships. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think, the caller kind of alluded to maybe exaggerating on other activities. And so I am assuming that in this particular case, the student has other things that they do, maybe just not to the same extent or with the same level of passion. And so that is where, I would kind of explore how to connect those things together possibly.
The other thought I had, and I really appreciate this caller's integrity, because I felt like what they were saying was, I want my student to be true to who they are, but it feels like everything in this process is forcing them to not be true to who they are. And I'm uncomfortable with that. And it's a question that we get in the counseling room from time to time. And it's one that we welcome because it comes from people that really have a core of integrity. Another thought that I had was, there are a lot of things that we do to put our best foot forward that do not mean we lack integrity. It's just part of what you do to put your best foot forward. So a couple examples that come to my mind are either getting married or just an interview. Let's either an interview or
more about getting married.
Well,
when you're
getting married or an interview, either one, you probably are gonna have your dress and your shoes and your makeup. Guy or girl, the hair is gonna look the best it can be, right? Mm-hmm. You might practice if it's an interview a little bit ahead of time with somebody. And so that's not necessarily a lack of integrity to know that there are times you're going to just put your best foot forward.
Right.
And so you shouldn't feel that you're being disingenuous to emphasize some of the things that that colleges value without just telling a bold-faced lie and making things up. To emphasize some of those other things. Like that is similar to what we do in other situations where we want to put our best foot forward. And, I oftentimes, use this example. I use the wedding example a lot with my students because I'll say, you're not going to get a facelift. You're not going to have an imposter walk down the aisle for you.
Yeah.
But you are gonna, probably have your best clothes and your best hair, and maybe if you need to drop 10 or 15 pounds, you might do that or whatever. So there is a little bit of presentation involved in the application that can be done without somebody feeling this is icky.
Right. It's if it's rooted in something that they do and is just sort of, like you said, the best face on that thing. For sure. I agree.
Yeah. And this kind of goes on the other path that you're saying. I mean, I know the caller said, do other people overly exaggerate other things? Is that what they do to get in? But, I could take it to the bank. I can't even think of a student where when we really probe, we didn't find other things that were a legitimate, genuine interest so that some other things could be accentuated. I mean, I will say this, most admission officers, especially if it's more selective school, like they don't want to see all I do is watch TV. I just watch Netflix and play video games. That's all I do. Like that isn't what they want to hear. And so I think that, let's just be honest about that. One other thought that I had was there's a lot of things to do in college, more so than high school. And so a lot of times there's more potential for other interests to be tapped, because of all the different choices you have in clubs and things, and that is going to exceed what's in your high school. And there's just a lot more opportunity there. And so the chances that another latent interest can get aroused and cultivated is a lot better in a college setting than in maybe a high school situation where there's a few limitations. It sounds like you want to say something, Carter.
Yeah, I mean, I love that you're kind of moving to the second part of the question here, because she's not just asking about the application itself, but also what happens when they actually get to college, and almost the relationship between the application and the student that shows up at college. And so, I do think, in a way, also, as when you're talking about watching TV and video games, video games are different from watching TV. Watching TV is, I would say, a much more passive activity than video games, where there is a participatory nature. And I do think, the way that a lot of students, young people, are playing video games these days is communal. They have headsets and microphones, and they're communicating with people all over the world who are playing games with them. There are, as we've alluded to, esports teams. There's video game clubs on campus. There are going to be people who are, on the same hall that coordinate playing video games at the same time together in a dorm. And so this can be something that helps strengthen or build community in some ways when they arrive at campus. So I first want to sort of reassure the caller, in a sense, that that I think students and teenagers, the ways that they shape community just look different, I think, than when us parents were younger. The other thing is, I think when students get to college, I'm not worried personally about the college kind of calling them out and holding them to account on what they said like that in the essay. Now, it's one thing, as we've kind of talked about, to lie blatantly, but if a student doesn't mention that they love playing video games and that they do community service, and they get to college and they don't do community service and they play video games, I don't think that people are going to sit there and say, like, you sold us a fake bill of goods. People's interests evolve. And so they could also just see, like, oh, maybe this kid worked really hard in high school and just needs a little time to veg out and recover from that. There's a lot of ways that people might think about that. And so, I think, as we've been talking about, if an application is rooted in reality and is reflecting a student's values, even if it is sort of their best foot that they have put forward, I don't think that there should be any concern about sort of how they are presenting themselves once they arrive on campus, and certainly not to the degree where they would be, asked to leave or face any sort of repercussions because they didn't mention that they happen to also play video games 8 hours a day.
No, you bring a lot of good points out. And one of the ones I love that you brought out was just the social role that video games can play. And I got to thinking, in the same way in which I said maybe you want a career in video game design, esports, something like that. That seems like that could be true to who you are. Another thing could be maybe you can become the person that can pull together the video game lovers and in organized activities or social events in high school. And then that could be presented. And there are great personal qualities that would come out in that sort of focus that could be very appealing, because colleges are always interested in community and always interested in people that are pullers and who bring people together. And so there could be some really good personal qualities that could be accentuated if that was something your student could do. And that could be maybe something they're more open to doing because of their love for video games.
And I think that's a great point, because right now, I'm assuming that this student is 10th or 11th grade, given the time of year for the question, maybe this is an opportunity. There's still time left before submitting and filling out the application. Can they, translate this love, if they haven't already, into something that is more of a communal activity or that does more proactively showcase some of those other traits that they want to highlight? I think that's a great point.
Yeah, and the last thing I really wanted to say was, if the concern is how are they going to get in, there's nothing else there. This is something we don't talk about as much as we probably should, but there are a sizable number of colleges that are not looking at extracurriculars at all when they make admissions decisions.
That's a great point. Yep.
Yeah, like we have a tendency to talk a lot about more selective schools where extracurriculars play a role and how much impact are you having, but there's quite a few schools. You'll see it's quite prevalent. Even bigger state schools, flagship schools, a place like a Penn State is an example.
Just the one I was thinking of, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Iowa, like lots of them. So that's something to think about as well. If you're really concerned, well, how are they going to get in? There's not a lot there. Like, you could build your list, or at least have certain portions of schools on your list that don't even look at activities whatsoever as part of the evaluation when they're looking at who they're going to admit. But this has been a great question. Listeners, keep sending these questions in. For a lot of our co-hosts, answering your questions is their favorite part. You really keep us on our toes. And so, thanks for sending this in. And to all the other people out there who are thinking about sending a question in, just speakpipe.com/YCBK. You got a big orange button, click it. And, you can always redo it if you don't like how it comes out. And for sending it in, you're going to have a choice of one of 7 books that our authors have agreed to donate to those who send in questions. So thanks, Carter.
Thank you.
Friends, you now have 7 books you can pick from if we play your SpeakPipe question or comment or tip on the air. We have our 4 Princeton review books, The Best 390 Colleges, College Admissions 101, Essays That Kick Apps, and Princeton Digital SAT Prep. Our 3 new editions are The Calm College Method by Lisa Ruff and Linda Depker, paperback or Kindle, Peter Pitt's Small College Magic Kindle version, and College Unmazed has a book, Your Guide to Design and Document Your Home School by Holly Ramsey and Michelle Everett, paperback edition. Our authors have generously agreed to cover the shipping and handling. Just send your name and full address, the book that you want, and the episode number where we aired your SpeakPipe question or tip. Please send that to your collegeboundkid@gmail.com, and we'll forward your request to the authors. Okay, friends, let's transition to my interview with Elliot Felix as he discusses his book, The Connected College. Let's hear part 2 of 3.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
All right, friends, we've reached part 2 of 3 in my interview with Elliot Felix on what are things we can learn from his book, The Connect to College. In part 2, Elliot talks about an aha moment he had when he was doing research for his book. Elliot talks about what we have to change when it comes to how we're handling email with students. Elliot talks about how we have to reinvent how libraries function and how we have to create next generation libraries. Elliot talks about what he does with these 120 colleges and universities that have hired him. Elliot talks about who are the people on his team and what are their roles. Elliot talks about how he and his team challenge colleges to move from something you do to something you are. And he gives us an example of this. Listen and enjoy. Well, what was there like one or two aha moments you had when you were interviewing leaders, things they said that you just thought, man, that's profound? Anything pop in your head?
Well, one that does come to mind, we were talking about student health and wellness, and I was talking to somebody who leads that at a large public research university, and he was saying something that I've seen in my own work, which is people hear mental health crisis and they jump right to more counseling.
Mm-hmm.
And that may be what's needed. But a lot of times there are lots of other things that are also needed, like time outdoors, exercise, time with friends, a sense of belonging, faculty mentors. And the interesting thing, time listening to music. And the interesting thing is a lot of those activities take time. So we got to talking about like, how can you actually unlock that time? And one service that a lot of students don't take advantage of, every campus will have something on time management. If you go to the Student Success Center, if you go to the library, there are people that are waiting for students to knock on the door or to come to a workshop so they can help you with study skills, with note-taking skills, with time management. And so if you do that stuff a little bit more efficiently, you actually free up the time to take care of yourself and spend time with friends and spend time outdoors and spend time exercising. And I thought that was really interesting. Sort of like time management seems like this basic perfunctory kind of thing, but it actually unlocks a lot of profound things.
That was a great example. That was powerful. All right, let's get back to some more things that you highlight in the book. So one of the things you mentioned is a next-gen student portal. And then you say you can't bombard students with emails. They don't read them. And all you do is confuse them with a sprawling tech stack that you can't afford. You got to bring it all together. Talk a little bit about what you're talking about here with this next-gen student portal.
Well, it's akin to what we were mentioning with the physical one-stop, bringing together these different offices, but it's doing that online because what's happening is universities will add more and more technology with the best of intentions, with good reasons. They have different functions. They'll get a new app that allows them to text students when there's an event that might interest them. They'll get another app that sends them a nudge about an upcoming appointment at the Student Success Center for tutoring or for that time management workshop. They'll have email from their department. They'll have email from the registrar about the deadline is coming. And so there's so many different channels and there's so many different messages, and often the messages aren't coordinated, that you get a really disjointed experience because you're using all this different technology. I talked to one head of enrollment management at a big public research university, and he was sort of going through the registration process, and he realized that you need 17 different tabs open, to look at all the different things they offer.
Wow.
And so I think folks that are really on top of this are trying to bring it all together in a much more coherent campus app that's like a one-stop shop for everything you need as a student, including messaging, so that you're not sending huge wall of text emails to students who aren't going to read them, let alone, commit them to memory. And then you can do things like that, like make messages feel like an Instagram post, right? Where there's a graphic and then there's like some bullets as opposed to 17 paragraphs or 17 tabs. So I think there are a lot of institutions that are really focusing on a much more streamlined and sophisticated student experience, in part because that's what students are expecting as they interact with other kinds of apps and the digital experiences they have with Netflix and Amazon.
Yeah, and there can be information overload out there too, right? And so you have to provide some pathway. Otherwise, I can see how it could be chaotic. Another thing you talk about, Elliot, in your book is the library as a student success hub. You talk about reinventing libraries. Talk a little bit about that. And I think you mentioned it looks like LSU is doing some things that you're pretty excited about. But talk a little bit about sort of what's maybe you don't like when you see in the library, and then when you see it, it's like, wow, yeah, you're kind of really doing it right.
Well, libraries have always been a place for quiet contemplation. And increasingly, in addition to that, they're also places for collaboration and creation, right? It's a place where you might go to work on that team project you get in a class, hopefully that's working with a company in the community. So instead of just, for your marketing class, creating a social campaign in the abstract, you're actually working with, let's say, a healthcare nonprofit in the community or a startup in the incubator. And so in addition to the quiet contemplation, the books and the journals, the creation and the collaboration, it's a great place to locate all the associated support services. Because if you think about that class project, you're probably going to have to make a presentation. Lots of campuses will have some kind of presentation practice room. They might even have people that can watch and critique your presentation. A lot of times they'll have like a data studio or a data lab to help you analyze and visualize the data in that presentation. They might have a maker space where you could 3D print a prototype of whatever it is you're making or print a poster. They might have a media lab where you're shooting and editing a video. And they might have that study skills, tutoring, support, writing. And libraries are a great place to put all those functions together, because then you're meeting students where they are and you're blending the places where people study and the places where they get support. And it makes it much more normal. It normalizes getting help, right? Like everybody goes to the writing center. Everybody gets help on their study skills. It doesn't mean that you're deficient. It means that you're awesome and you're investing in yourself and you want to succeed. So I think like a next generation library brings all these things together. It's quiet space, it's collaborative space, it's support all in one place that makes it much more accessible and available and frankly exciting.
Oh, that's good. That's good. All right, let's come back to some of your observations in a sec. I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, like, what does it look like when you say you've worked with 120 colleges? Like, do they bring you in and ask you to, take a look at everything they're doing architecturally, and as it relates to learning? And do you do a survey? Do you do like a on campus, couple hour walkthrough? And like, what does that work look like? What are they bringing you in to do? And what's kind of your process like?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it can vary because there's sort of three things that we're doing: strategic planning, facilities planning, and operational planning. And so sometimes those are separate. Like we did the strategic plan for Carnegie Mellon's College of Engineering, helping them determine what are our goals, what are we going to focus on. Then we also kind of down the street at Carnegie Mellon help them create a brand new business school. And so that's looking at what are the courses we're going to teach? What's the research we're going to do? How are we going to engage students? What kinds of spaces do we need? How do they get organized? And, and then not quite down the street, but over at UVA, we help them redesign their advising experience, because that fuzzy time before you declare a major, sometimes it's really unclear who to turn to, where to get advice when students want to figure out what path they want to pursue. And so we help them think through. They had this idea of what they call total advising, which was a much more holistic approach. And so in all those projects, it's surveys, it's interviews, it's observations. It's like, back to design thinking, right? It's using design thinking to define the problem to solve, and then working with folks through workshops, creating experiments, tests, prototypes, pilots on different solutions. And those solutions might be new kinds of support services, like, we're going to help students make better presentations. It might be about spaces. We need a presentation practice space. It might be about the staffing, like what roles do they need, with what training to deliver these services.
Focus groups, probably. I could see that being something that's part of what your work. You're nodding your head over there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
So talk about your team. Like, I think you have around a dozen or so. Am I correct? Something like that on your team?
Well, so I started a boutique strategy consultancy, and after 10 years, we were acquired by a big global company, and that team of 15 or so folks is now blended in as part of a larger team of 80 consultants working in the U.S. and 3,000 people globally. And some of us are design thinkers, or what I joke among friends, like I call myself a recovered architect. But there are lots of folks that started off in architecture and learned new things, and there's other people with social science, people with MBAs, kind of everything, engineering, everything in between. And I think that mix of skills and experiences and backgrounds is what affords us like a fresh perspective when we're trying to understand an institution and help them with their strategy, with their space, with their staffing and operations, with their technology systems.
And that makes sense, because I can't imagine Carnegie Mellons and the UVAs of this world, they are going to want to go with an organization that they feel has probably a lot of expertise across a lot of different people, rather than one-stop shop where everybody has all the knowledge. Just organizations of that size and scope, I can imagine it's pretty competitive winning those kinds of opportunities. How many people would you say are out there in this space that kind of do what you do? I'm sure who kind of who the other players are in the country.
Yeah, I mean, I think they range from big management consultancies to with hundreds of thousands of employees, to small boutique consultancies, many of whom are started by folks that used to work in academia and then, maybe opened up a consultancy as their second career in their twilight years, or whatever it might be. So there's a range of, thousands of organizations and tens of thousands of people. There's 4,000 colleges and universities in the country. So that can keep, they need a lot of help, and that can keep a lot of folks busy.
Mm-hmm. No, this is good. This is really good. So a couple more pointers off your list, and then I still have some more questions for you, because the more you talk, the more I get curious about your work, and hopefully I'm asking questions that our listeners are asking. So you talk about front door for corporate engagement, and you talk about every college or university has faculty and students working with companies in the community. Talk to us a little bit about that. Is this something that you feel is more the exception than the norm when you see this? And what can a school do to up their game in this area?
It is. One of the things that I talk about in the book is how you move from something you do to something you are. And so if you think about something like experiential learning, right, where students are working on projects for companies and community groups, they're doing internships, they're doing co-ops, and it's really a project-based learning model. There are some schools like WPI, Worcester Polytechnic, where it's just like that's who they are as project-based learning. And then there's other folks that do it just kind of as a one-off, right? Like there's an adjunct part-time faculty member in the business school, and she knows a company in the community. So when it's time to do her marketing class, she leverages those relationships and they do a class project for the company. And that's kind of the norm, is that it's like ad hoc one-offs. And then on another side of campus, you've got the alumni office, and they're trying to like build relationships with alumni at work. And then another part of campus, you've got the continuing ed and professional ed and executive ed folks that are trying to bring those alums or execs in the community back to campus for learning and development programs or for an executive MBA. And so all these different folks are trying to make connections between the college and the companies, but usually it's not very coordinated. And usually, like if you have a company they are like, hey, let's get a marketing class from the college down the street to like noodle on this project or on this problem, they don't know where to start. And so I think that the universities and the colleges that are doing this really well create a front door and they make it really easy to work with them. They say, here are the themes that we're really expert in. Here are the kinds of projects we can work with you on. Here's who to contact. And I think this is one of the really interesting things that's going to change colleges and universities, because the closer they work with companies, the more they're going to have to shed certain things that have been sacrosanct, like, the schedule, because like companies don't just want students to work on projects in the 15 weeks in the fall and the spring, right? It may continue on over the summer. And so, and likewise, they may want some of that work to actually happen at their corporate HQ or in their office. So I think this is one of the things that's just like blending colleges and companies. And I think a front door is a great place to start.
No, makes a lot of sense. Friends, hopefully you enjoyed part 2 of 3 of my interview with Elliot Felix. We hope you join us next week for the final part. Okay, friends, time to hear from a couple of my former students, Daniela from suburban Philadelphia, Summer from Chicago, to you Penn students as they help us to understand the University of Pennsylvania. Time for part 2 of 3.
And now it's time for our College Spotlight of the Week.
Friends, we're talking about the University of Pennsylvania, and we're up to part 2 of 3. And in part 2, Daniela and Summer share their experience with the other 2 colleges, Wharton, which is the business school, and the College of Nursing. Summer and Daniela continue to talk about some of the Penn stereotypes, and they discuss if they feel they're true. Daniela talks about coffee chatting and how foundational it is at Penn, and she tells us what it is. Summer and Daniela describe Penn's personality for us. Daniela and Summer get to be college counselors. I asked them, what does the student look like? That if you were me and you were a college counselor and you would say, I think you need to put the University of Pennsylvania on your college list, what does that student look like? So we discussed that. Listen and enjoy. I was originally supposed to have somebody from Wharton, and it just didn't work out. The scheduling didn't work, but we had somebody from the Midwest at Wharton who's having a fantastic experience. Nursing is the other one, which is very small, only 100 students per class in nursing, so that's the smaller one. So what is your perception of Wharton and nursing? I know you weren't in those colleges, but I know you know a lot of people in those colleges, just socially. And what would you say is your impression of both nursing and Wharton being bigger? So you may know more people there. I don't know.
Yeah, I would say I actually know like a pretty decent amount of people in nursing as well.
Oh, good.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like they're everywhere.
They are. They're
especially
booked.
with
The nursing
pre-med.
students are amazing.
I feel like
they're doing so much. Yeah, I did.
So like
Sorry.
So I would say Wharton has so many resources and such a strong alumni network. I think like that's the main thing to mention. The students there have access to like so much career support and development, as do like people in every school. But there's so many global programs there, and there's such an engaged alumni base. I mean, people will walk around wearing like Wharton hoodies and like not even Penn hoodies, like they'll wear their Wharton hoodies. People are very proud to go to Wharton. And like even for students outside of Wharton, like myself, I feel like it still shapes like the broader Penn culture at our school. It offers like so many different opportunities to students through like interdisciplinary programs, like the opportunity to take classes within the school and beyond. I know like personally, through engineering, I was a part of like this competition where we had to take a Penn engineering technology and pitch it to investors. And we had Wharton advisors. I was working with students from the Wharton school, students within biology, very interdisciplinary. It was kind of like a health tech competition. I thought that was really cool and something that really stemmed from the strong entrepreneurial spirit we have within Wharton. So yeah, I can let Daniela talk for a little bit.
So what do you want to add,
Yeah.
Daniela, either to nursing or Wharton or both?
Summer is so well spoken. I think she captured Wharton's essence perfectly. I think nursing, the one thing to mention is that it is very small. It's also the top nursing program in the country, which Penn is very proud of. And it being so small, like they really walk the walk of like hands-on learning and education and mentorship. So like nursing, they have a formal every year. Like they really get a lot of, they start their clinicals earlier than most nursing programs do. So which is a benefit to them because they get more like experience on the wards, which is really what's most helpful to you as a nurse. But they also have incredible professors. They do a lot of research. They have a lot of opportunities to do like global experiences, which is wonderful. And again, like I just think it being so small, like nursing is such a wonderful profession, and all of the people in the nursing school, both the students and the professors, are just so wonderful at, making that and really like incorporating that into their experience. So I think also their curriculum is just very unique. So I think nursing is probably the hardest school to do like that interdisciplinary crossover from, just because you have to take a lot of classes and they're very specific about the classes that you take. Every other school, like I think I took classes in Wharton and engineering at Penn. I never took a nursing class, but like you could take nutrition if you wanted to. Like that's a very popular one. People like to take nutrition. So I think it's important to mention that you can take classes across every school. You're not like only allowed to take classes in the college because you're in the college.
Yeah, I would like to add on to that. I think with engineering, something I wanted to make sure that I had is I was able to take other classes. I think a lot of schools are very focused. You get to engineering, you're doing your coursework, you're doing math, you're doing physics, you're doing chemistry. I wanted to make sure I had time to explore like other classes, and I definitely have had time to do that. Within engineering, we have like social sciences, humanities, and like technology, business, and society like requirements. And so like I've taken so many cool classes. I've taken like philosophy, I've taken a communications class, I've taken my writing seminar, I took an acting class. That one was really fun. I didn't expect myself doing that. And I also took like a volunteer-based class where we got to go into like Philadelphia high schools. And I know we were mentioning this earlier, but it's really fun to interact with the greater Philadelphia community. I got to go into these high schools and kind of teach them like cool little physics experiments. I thought that was super fun. So I've had time to explore other things. I think that's something like unique to Penn is like they're really emphasizing like getting out to the other schools, using our like cross school like resources. So.
All right, I'm going to forget the internet stereotypes, but I'm going to throw out some other stereotypes that some of them I would say are things I've heard from some Penn students over the years. So about Wharton, some people find Wharton is competitive and cutthroat within the Penn culture. That's one. And I'll throw out another one and see what your thoughts are. That there's just tremendous amount of wealth there. Like I'll hear stories of like we had like a $5 million house and we came there and I feel really, really poor. Like there's just tremendous wealth within the student body. So what are your thoughts on either one of those?
I don't know. Summer, do you have thoughts?
I'm trying to think. You said the first one was Wharton being competitive.
Yeah, like cutthroat, like with particularly Wharton, they feel like people are trying to get those, those IB jobs and the finance bros, and they're just, and it just creates a level of competitiveness that particularly is true in Wharton.
Like, I wasn't in Wharton, so I can't speak directly to that experience, but I have a lot of friends in Wharton. Actually, I lived with 6 girls my senior year, and 4 of my roommates were all in Wharton. And honestly, I don't really feel like at the end of the day, after everything has shaken out, it ends up being that competitive. I think for the most part, you're all friends. Is it probably stressful during that 2-month period your sophomore year where you're recruiting to all these IB jobs? Yes. I don't think I lived through that with my friends. I don't think it ended up being I'm not going to tell you what the interview questions were because I want the job and I don't want you to get it. I don't think that. I'm sure that happens. It would happen everywhere. The reality is these are very coveted jobs. So I think if you went to any competitive school in the country and you ask them what those 4 months are like, they're going to tell you it's a little cutthroat and a little toxic. To the wealth question, there is no question that Penn is has just a really wealthy student body. I don't think it's mandatory to be a bajillionaire to go there and have a good experience. I certainly wasn't, and I had so much fun, but it is something to be prepared for. I think it was definitely a shock to my system when I got to Penn. But that there's just levels of wealth that I had never even imagined. But for the most part, I don't think people are rubbing it in your face. I don't know, Summer, what would you say?
Yeah, I guess talking to the Wharton cutthroat thing, I think Penn is very high achieving, and that can be mistaken as cutthroat at some points.
That's a good point.
Yeah, we have a very visible career-oriented culture, and personally, I had no idea what IB was, what it meant before I got to Penn.
Me neither.
I also didn't know what consulting was before I got to Penn, and then I get there and there's all of these clubs. Freshman year, everyone's oh, what club are you joining? To get these consulting connections. I just kind of laughed at it. I was oh, I have no idea what that is. And I think that can definitely make things feel more competitive, especially during recruiting season. But I just didn't let that bother me or get to me. You can really do whatever you want with the resources that you have. And again, I think I know so many people who are so willing to share recruiting prep, to practice interviews with you. All of my Wharton friends would practice together for their IB interviews or do consulting casing together. And there's so many resources because everyone at Penn is so focused on these career goals that there's infinite resources that you have available to you. I guess as to the wealth, this is definitely something that was a culture shock to me. I came from a high school in Chicago where our admissions are based off of socioeconomic status, where we're divided equally between, they split Chicago into 4 tiers and 25% from 1, 2, 3, and 4. So my high school is very socioeconomically diverse. And coming to Penn, I guess I also didn't realize that there was this level of wealth that existed in the world that I was unaware of. But again, I don't think people are rubbing it in your face, but it definitely is something to consider. But I think it's something that's manageable once you get here. And you can also surround yourself with whoever you want, and you can make friends with whoever. I think Penn, and especially every college, you can really find your place within it. So I wouldn't worry about not thinking you're going to fit in because of certain stereotypes, because I know people who fit all of these stereotypes that you're describing, and they all have their place within our school. So.
But it is important, and I appreciate your transparency, because Danielle's coming from a boarding school where people are paying $70,000 for high school. And so
that's true.
You have been exposed to, a population that's much wealthier than the average high school experience, and you still felt it. So it's still, so it's something to be, I'm glad that you brought that up. It's not, but the reality is, it's the same thing at USC. It's the same thing at Duke. It's I'm going through this series of meetings I'm doing with my students. I did one yesterday with a student at Vanderbilt. And a lot of the things you're saying are things the student was saying. All right. And this is not a student that gets financial aid, but she's I had no idea, the private planes and the level of wealth. And then the clubs, right? The student tried to get into one of the competitive business clubs with a 5% admit rate, but they only take a couple dozen people. So your point is well taken. A lot of the things we're talking about are going to be true at these schools that are taking like the top 1% of students. You know, whether it's Penn or it's Vanderbilt or it's, you know, Northwestern, or we could, you know, go down the list. Yeah.
I agree. I don't think this is like unique at all. But I will say, like, to Penn's credit, I did feel it was much more like it's very Penn's culture is built entirely around this idea of like coffee chatting. Everyone is always coffee chatting at Penn. And what that means is you literally reach out to a total stranger who you don't know and you say, "Hey, I'm interested in this thing that you do, and I would like to get coffee with you." And then you find a time and you go to Pret in Huntsman, or like in my day we would go to Saxby's, which I think they closed, which is
They
a
closed it
crime,
last year. I'm so sad.
which is horrible because I loved that Saxby so much. Anyway, besides the point. And then you go and you sit there with a perfect stranger and you just talk and you connect and you like network. And like that has been so fruitful for so many people. And if that wasn't like, if Penn was really as cutthroat and like cold as people sometimes make it out to be, that wouldn't exist. When in reality, I do think it's like foundational to Penn as a place is like that sort of like tiny interaction, you know, and like putting yourself out there and being brave and somebody taking time out of their day to talk to you, like it's so natural at Penn. And I don't think it would be that way if it was so competitive. But yes, I will say the wealth thing definitely shocked me.
So you've already mentioned one thing, both of you, that was a partial answer to my next question, which is what's something you didn't know until you got there. But besides the wealth, is there anything else that I didn't really realize this about Penn until I got here?
Something that I would say is I definitely expected college to be difficult, but like Penn is very hard academically. Coming from someone in high school where maybe I didn't have to study for every class, I came into college like not necessarily knowing what to expect. And it was kind of a slap in the face freshman year. I think especially in STEM, there's a lot of weed out classes that both of us can relate to. We've probably taken some of the very exact same classes just a few years apart.
Oh my God.
But like, yeah, I mean, something I'd say is like, I also didn't anticipate the amount of help that would be available for me. So like we have like a wine garden like tutoring center, and like I was always at those drop-in tutoring sessions.
Me too.
Recommend them so much. I think people are afraid coming in to Penn. You're at the top of your class in high school, and you're afraid to ask for help. But Penn is going to be hard. Like, you're with the best of the best at Penn, and you're going to be challenged. And I think that's amazing, but I think you also need to learn how to ask for help. Again, with the office hours, I completely echo that. I know every single one of my TA's names. All my professors know me, and that's because I am always at office hours. I think my friends, like, always joke that I'm, like, if they don't know where I am, I'm at some office hours.
Oh my God,
you just have to be willing to, like, ask for help, and... yeah, but, like, I'm not going to lie. Like, you're going to be challenged at Penn, and I think that's something that's amazing, and you're pushed to your best. But there's also that support that's there for you, so...
So I'm going to share a story,
100%.
and you can tell me if you want me to edit this and cut it out, Summer. So I know I was having a conversation with Summer's mom during her freshman year, and because Summer's never had anything other than an A, and all of a sudden she's not getting an A. And so it was one of those classes. The name was so hard, I got a headache hearing it, whatever it was. Whatever. And
It's probably Sis 120. Did you take that?
Wait, no, thankfully not.
So Summer's mom ended up getting a tutor for Summer. And I'll just say this tutor is a TA at one of the most competitive schools in the country. And the tutor says, I cannot believe this is what they're teaching their freshmen, and said some of the questions she didn't know answers to. You know?
Yeah, this is a true story. And I do some mentoring for like freshman engineering girls at Penn, and I always tell them this story. I mean, all the girls come in and they're straight A students usually, and I always share like the amount of struggle that I experienced my freshman year. And I am not a straight A student at Penn, and I am so transparent about that. I think it's like rare to find a straight A student at Penn. They definitely exist. But personally, I struggled coming into Penn, and all of the, like, yeah, exactly. Like this tutor, she sometimes didn't know the answer to our questions. And my mom's a high school teacher. And I mean, she was showing her colleagues who studied this in college, and they were also in disbelief. I think the freshman year courses definitely are meant to challenge you and push you. And once you get through that, I think you can almost accomplish anything, which sounds like super cheesy now
No,
that I
it's
said it.
just so
But
true. I like couldn't agree more. I have a very similar story my freshman year. I couldn't agree more. I think freshman year is really hard. I think reaching out to resources is very hard, and like realizing that there's really, you don't have to be a straight A student. Like you will be fine. I was a straight A student and everything turned out okay. It's very stressful at first, but like that first year is the hardest hurdle, and I would recommend to like be very conscientious about what classes you take. Like, I think I took too many hard classes at once, and that was my downfall. I should not have done that. I should have like spaced it out a little bit more. And so like looking back, that's like definitely something I would recommend to incoming college students everywhere, honestly.
So every college has a personality. How would you describe Penn's personality?
That's such a good question. I don't know.
Summer, why don't you go first?
okay, I guess, that is really hard. Okay, I feel like no matter what I say, it's going to sound cheesy because I just love Penn so much. So don't laugh at me, but I guess like...
Well, here's what I'll say, because I talk with Summer and Daniela. Like, everything they're saying here is what they say offline. They're not just, like, putting on, like, airs to, you know, like their admissions office, and they're afraid that somebody's listening to what they're going to say. So this is what they say offline, too. So I know they're being genuine.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, this does sound cheesy, but like I'd say like vibrant and like lively and also very welcoming. Like we have such a social campus, and I feel like there's always something going on. Like as Daniela was saying at the beginning, like people are always so excited to be like involved in what they love. And that like is just like infectious throughout campus. There's like such a tight-knit community for the amount of people that we have. I know we're a relatively small school, but I know like when you get into the thousands, it can feel big, but it really does feel like a tight-knit community that's like so lively, and everyone's so willing to help, so willing to like, you can reach out to people older than you and they'll share resources, help you through. And I don't know, that sounds cheesy, but there's always something happening. Everyone's so kind and welcoming. So I just want to echo that. Yeah, I guess that's the personality I'd describe.
Anything you want to add to that, Danielle?
No, I think she put it perfectly. I think I would just say that like I think Penn is just so like Penn, sometimes you'll walk down Locust and you'll just feel like the school itself like is alive. Like outside of the people just being there. Like it just has such a history, and
I'm going to stop you for a
that
sec,
history is
Daniela.
so important.
So when you said Locust,
yeah.
that's like inside Penn talk. Can you explain that to someone who hasn't visited?
So like Penn is in between blocks between like 34th and 40th, and like a couple of like I think it's between like Chestnut and Walnut, but I don't actually.
It's like 3 blocks by like 7 blocks. Very
right,
compact.
3 by 7. It's very compact, but then like in the middle of the way through, from like one corner of 34th all the way up to another corner of 40th, is just like a diagonal street called Locust Walk, and it cuts straight through campus. So like I always would say to people, like if you're lost your freshman year, just find Locust and stay on Locust. Like don't walk off of Locust because you'll get where you need to go from there. But that's like our main walkway where like all of the pretty buildings and the libraries and like the dorms, the upperclassmen dorms are there, the dining halls, and like in the winter they put like little like Christmas lights up. They hang them across the walkway, and then they do like a lighting ceremony.
Light up Locust, they call it.
Yeah, light up
It's
Locust,
so pretty.
exactly. And like they decorate it for like anything that's going on. If you're at Penn on a Friday, which is when I recommend you tour if you are visiting Penn, there will be students out there tabling their dance competitions or like raising money for this or that, or people will just be sitting out there like, and so we call it sabsing, see and be seen. So like, or at least that's what they called it when I was there.
Wait,
like,
no, yeah, we still use that.
You use sabs. I'm like, do you want to sabs on Locust? Which just means go and sit on Locust and like do your work outside and like see the people walking by you. But yeah, that's Locust.
So I'm going to give you my role. You're now the college counselor. All right. And you have people coming into your office all the time asking about schools, and you're like working on building a college list. And so describe the person that you would say, yeah, Penn would be a great fit for you. And then describe the person that you would be like, no, Penn is not for you. What does that look like?
That's hard.
I feel like Penn has, I I don't know, Summer, would you agree? I think Penn is really for someone who has a good amount of self-motivation.
Yeah.
I think you have a better experience if you are self-motivated at Penn, because there's so many opportunities. It's really just about like picking the one that you want to pursue and like taking advantage of it, but that requires some intrinsic drive. So for someone who's very self-motivated, Penn is great. For someone who is not as self-motivated, and like really needs a lot of structure, I don't know if Penn is the best fit. But I don't know if that's a blanket statement I would make. What about you, Summer?
Wait, I think you stole the words out of my mouth, honestly. I mean, like, it's a hard question because I feel like Penn is, like, such a diverse community and we have so many different things happening on campus that it's, like, super easy to find your people, and I had such a positive experience freshman year with that. Like, anyone can find their pocket of campus at Penn, but you have to be motivated to go find that pocket. So I think just, like, anyone who's motivated would be a great fit, and, like, someone who wants to make the most out of their college experience because it's all there for you. Penn has amazing resources, and you just have to go out there and get it. I mean, it's hard to say, like, who wouldn't be a good fit for Penn, but I guess, yeah, like, you wouldn't be able to take, if you weren't as motivated, like, take as good of advantage of, like, all the resources we have.
If you weren't interested in an urban campus, like, if you wanted to be somewhere, like, sprawling with lots of trees, like, my younger brother, I was like dying for him to come to Penn, and he visited and he goes,
no, he wasn't feeling it.
He wasn't feeling it. Mark worked with my brother too, and I gave him the tour of a lifetime. Okay, I pulled out all the stops. I literally planted my friends along Locust. That's how much I wanted my brother to come to Penn, and he didn't want to do it, but that's fine. He looks across campus. Like, I took him to this pretty lookout spot, and he goes, "There's just not enough trees." And I said, "Okay, whatever."
I mean, like, I came from a city, so, like, I personally loved it. I wanted pretty architecture as well as, like, a city. I love taking the train around to go to Center City. I love walking to Trader Joe's. It's, like, a 20-minute walk. It's, like, my favorite activity is just to go into Center City. But I think, like, I was used to that because I grew up in an urban environment. Like, I took the L to school, like, took the subway. That's our, like, we call the L in Chicago. But I could see how, like, someone coming from, like, maybe a more rural environment who, like, or, like, if you want, like, a college town, I know a lot of my friends go to Big Ten schools in the Midwest. Definitely a little different from that.
Yeah, like, if you want a big sports experience, I don't know if Penn is necessarily the right fit for you. Like, if you want a social life that revolves around college sports, that's not us.
Friends, this concludes part 2 of 3 of my interview with Summer and Daniela, 2 students at UPenn in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Hope you join us next week for part 3 of 3. Friends, on Monday's episode, I'm going to continue with part 2 of 2, a series I'm doing on external or outside scholarships. And this section is really focused on giving you some practical tips so that you can have a higher win rate as you go for those external or outside scholarships. And then we'll transition and we'll have part 2 of 3 of my interview with Elena Hicks, and she's the Assistant Vice Provost and Dean of Admission, or the Chief Enrollment Officer. I know that's a long title, at SMU in Dallas, Texas. And we're going through 17 impressions that I have of SMU over the last 35 years. And she's going to either amplify them and provide some more subtext and context, or she'll push back if she doesn't agree. And we're going to cover impressions 4 through 14. And friends, for my quote today, I want to leave you with some words of wisdom from the great Desmond Tutu. And this is what Desmond Tutu had to say. Hope is being able to see that there is light despite all of the darkness. In other words, if you feel completely just engulfed in despair, hope is being able to see that little light in the tunnel that can be grounds for optimism. Lots of ways we can apply that to our lives, friends. See you on Monday. And that's our show. Big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you will get every single episode as soon as they are released. If you want to support our podcast, you can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can say positive things about your college-bound kid on your social media feed. And you can help us stay commercial-free and pay our staff by donating on the yourcollegeboundkid.website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. And if you have a question or a recommendation, just go to speakpipe.com/YCBK, hit the orange button, and speak. We will do our best to get your question in your own voice on an upcoming episode. I am the producer of the podcast, and I live in Metro Atlanta. We have a fantastic team that has over 200 years of admissions and counseling experience. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff in North Carolina, Susan Tree in Pennsylvania, Vince Garcia in California, Julia Esquivel in Massachusetts, Linda Depker in Missouri, Andy Strickler, the Chief Enrollment Officer at Connecticut College, New London, Connecticut, Hillary Dickman, an Admission Officer at Colorado College in Colorado Springs, and our International Admissions Expert, Kevin Newton in Dallas, Texas. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs from Kimberly Bloss. Our reliable webmaster is Stylionis Dimitru. Website updates are done by Joyce Stucker. Our image editor is Vlad Honchar. If you want to have a coaching session with me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you want to reach someone else on our team, all of our bios with contact info can be found at yourcollegeboundkid.com under the About YCBK tab. If you want to get our free monthly YCBK newsletter, YCBK Plus, it is also under the About YCBK tab. If you want to see our recommended books and websites, they are on our website under the Resources tab. While you're on our website, check out our hundreds of interviews in their entirety. Check out our college spotlights, our blog, and our upcoming events. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting with you every single Monday and every single Thursday.